Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, quite a few different styles, but I would say this brewery are probably the best known Swedish craft brewery in the world. In fact, they export their beers all over the place. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that we've had one or two of from them before. I know they do this style pretty well, and this is one of the first beers that they're producing at their own brewery here in Sweden. So quite exciting, very curious to see what it has in store for us. So fingers crossed it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, let's go for it and see how we get on. For this review we are going to head up towards Stockholm once again, the Sundbyberg district to be specific, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Omnipollo. So this particular beer is called the Trismegistus. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, it could be Trismegistus, I'm not 100% certain. But this beer comes in at 10.2% ABV. It's a triple New England Hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And this one was released as part of the local Osmoskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for August of 2021. They released this along with double IPA, and you'll see me review the double IPA in a couple of videos time. But yeah, like I said, this is one of the first beers that Omnipollo have released through Systembolaget here in Sweden from their new brewery in Stockholm. So yeah, definitely cool to be able to review this one for you here on the channel, of course. But let's crack on with this review then and see how we get on. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Omnipollo before, and we will no doubt add some more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Omnipollo. So, Omnipollo, as I've told you before, was founded back in 2011 by Henrik Fenty, who is a home brewer, and Carl Grandin, who is a clothing designer. But the two were good friends, and they decided to form a brewery together after they discussed at length how insular the craft beer scene was both in Sweden and throughout the world. And they said they wanted to take a different approach to brewing and reinvigorate it from both a stylistic and a gastronomic sense. And this is why they followed the route of putting lots of different kind of adjuncts and flavour essences and things into the beer. But they felt that on this basis, the partnership between a home brewer and a clothing designer was pretty logical, in fact. But the name Omnipollo is derived from omnipotent chicken, so Omnipollo, pollo being Spanish for chicken. And these guys were gypsy brewers completely until 2020. But they opened the Omnipollo's Hat in Stockholm as a collaboration with Pizza Hut, and this is quite a popular place. I do want to go there and film a little out and about video, but there's many of the Omnipollo beers there on tap, and there's some very good pizza as well. But in 2019 they also opened up another one in another bar in Hamburg in Germany. They've also got one in Gothenburg these days as well, and they also have one in Tokyo in Japan, which I am hoping to visit either later this year or early next year. We'll just need to see. But in March of 2020 they announced that they would open their own brewery in Sundbyberg, which is to the northwest of central Stockholm, and this is in a former church that had previously housed Sundbyberg's Brewery. But the brewing capacity there when they started off was around 100,000 litres per year, but it's been scaled up considerably to around 600,000 litres per year from what I understand, and they are starting to put their beers out there from that now, which is pretty exciting. But as of August 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 380 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and as I said, there's lots of different styles. This brewery are known for their big kind of cakey imperial stouts. Actually, you could probably argue that this brewery are one of the kind of founders of the whole pastry stout type thing, but they do some really good kind of normal beers, if you can call it that, as well. I would always recommend Nebuchadnezzar. That's an awesome West Coast double IPA. Fata Morgana, one of the original European New England IPAs, I would say, and that's definitely worth checking out. But you know, the imperial stouts, as you see, you've got the Noah, The Yellow Belly, if you can get it, those are pretty damn good as well. And of course you've got the Bianca series, which is a little bit pricey for what it is, but I think it's pretty damn interesting, in fact. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you actually about Omnipollo for the moment. These guys, as I say, potentially the most well-known Swedish craft beer brand these days, and doing some rather interesting beers. But yeah, try some of the more adjunct heavy ones and then try some of the more normal ones, I guess you could say. That will give you a good idea of what Omnipollo are about, because quite a few people in the early days weren't sure about this brewery because of all these flavour essences and adjuncts and things that they were putting into the beers. But yeah, I mean, I think it kind of shows you it's a completely different style of brewing, and I do quite enjoy some of their adjunct heavy beers, but the fact that they can also do some of the kind of more purist beers very well, I think shows you how good they actually are. But yeah, interesting, definitely an interesting company. So basically try these guys and see what you think. But yeah, if you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it for your history section in this video. So a little bit about the name of this beer itself. As we said, Trismegistus. So apparently this is named after a Hellenic syncretic figure. Syncretic, of course, means that it's a combination of beliefs, and this syncretic figure is a combination of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Tot. And Tot was the one, of course, who had the big beak sort of thing. So yeah, kind of interesting actually to do that. But this is a common theme. You know, Nebuchadnezzar, I'm sure, was an ancient Egyptian king or something like that, if I remember rightly. But yeah, they quite like naming their beers after ancient Egyptian things. So yeah, pretty cool. But as we said, this beer comes in at 10.2% ABV. It's a New England Hazy triple IPA, whatever you want to call it. And the artwork on this one is pretty nice. Black top on the can, of course. I believe that I paid about 69 or 70 Swedish krona for this. So this was a wee bit more expensive. And you do find this with the Omnipollo beers, is that they are a little bit more expensive than some of the other beers that are in the same kind of style category actually, through Systembolaget. But it's just kind of how it goes. I wanted to try this one because it was the first Omnipollo beer I'd seen in quite a little while, and it's one of the first triple IPAs that I've had from them too, if memory serves me correctly. But it says on the side here, Trismegistus is our abyssal triple IPA brewed with a wealth of the juiciest and most pungent hops we could find, enthusiastically crafted at our church brewery on Sturegatan 41 in Sundbyberg, Sweden. Yeah, and there's also a new website, Omnipollo Kyrka, as well, so I'll need to check that one out. I've noticed as well that I'm getting some little black bits off the things on my fingers. You can see that there, some of the ink is running, but the can is sweating a little bit. But as we say, 440 milliliter, this one cost me about 70 Swedish kronor, so that's €7, about £6.25 sterling, something like that, and I guess somewhere in the region of $8 American for those of you watching over there. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. I mean, Fata Morgana for me is an awesome beer, and these guys really know what they're doing when it comes to the New England IPAs. I think the last New England IPA we had from Omnipollo was actually brewed at Total City in Denmark. So yeah, that is kind of interesting. So yeah, I'm trying to remember, I think that is right actually. I'm sure I had one that was brewed at Total City. But yeah, anyway, this thing looks like this one just looks like straight up fruit juice. Okay, so this has to be one of the most opaque New England IPAs that I've ever come across. So first off, we can say that this one pours a lovely bright kind of pale yellow colour. It's about the same colour as pineapple juice, and I always like comparing the New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what the appearances remind me of. But yeah, this one would remind me of a kind of mango or pineapple juice, something like that, very, very pale yellow. I think it appears a little bit richer to you guys on the viewfinder though. But remember, when it comes to the colour of your beer, it depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, that determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. And then any adjuncts that you put in any barrel aging that you do will also play a role. But when it comes to New England IPAs, generally speaking, you don't have to worry about those 2 factors. That's more a lot for sour beers that you have to care about those 2 factors, of course. But the level of haze on this one, as you can see, this one, it's like, you know, it's like paint or something like that. You cannot see through this thing at all. So yeah, this is one of the most opaque New England IPAs I think I've ever come across. This is definitely a big soupy, gloopy beast. But at 10.2%, it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? But yeah, the level of haze in these beers depends on one, the wheat content, two, the oat content, and the yeast is also going to play a role as well. There's not really a general rule about how hazy one of these things should be based on that though, because it can vary from recipe to recipe, brewery to brewery, and so on. I've had 10.2% New England IPAs that haven't been anywhere near as hazy as this. So yeah, it just depends on the individual recipe, in fact. But in terms of its appearance, there's nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. It's a triple IPA, so you would expect it to be a bit more hazy, and it's got that lovely light kind of juicy fruity colour to it, which is again one of the kind of trademark things of a New England IPA. So yeah, nothing untoward about the appearance of this one. Let's have a look at the aroma and just see how we go. That smells very, very nice. Straight away with this one, you can just smell that it's a big sort of creamy mass. But I think it's going to be very well balanced as well. So as I've said with New England IPAs before, for me there's quite a few different directions that you can take these beers in. Either they can be more kind of farmhousey and yeasty, they can be a little bit more rye leaning and grainy, they can be wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or indeed they can be quite sweet and brown sugary leaning. But quite often you'll find that these beers display a number of these different characteristics. This one is doing that. You can smell a few different things in this. So straight away with it, you're going to smell the big kind of creamy oaty quality, but underneath that you can smell the sort of softer, fresh, white bready character in there from the barley malt, and there's also a bit of that wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose. So you can smell a combination of all three things in this. So yeah, the aroma out of this is very, very nice actually. It feels very familiar as well actually too. And I'm trying to think why it smells really familiar. I do wonder, maybe they've got a brewer working for them now in that brewery that I've had something else from under the name of another brewery, but there's just something extremely familiar about the aroma of this beer, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But anyway, we'll just go through the beer and dissect it in the way that we normally do. So, as I said, backbone of this beer, you can smell a lovely kind of big, fresh, white bready character to it. There's definitely little hints of bread crust in there. You've got a big kind of oaty creaminess to this one, and at 10.2% ABV, that is something you'd expect. You would expect a big, thick, oaty character to be present in this beer. You get a little bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose, but the wheat in this one actually comes across as being quite smooth in a sense, because you can smell the wheat sort of thickening out the bready part of this beer as well. Then it's just got a little bit of a bite on the back of the nose. So yeah, the sort of wheaty, the balance in the kind of old school malty parts of this New England IPA is quite interesting. Quite a few of the New England IPA breweries these days are moving towards the sweet end of the spectrum, which is kind of interesting. And I do like the sweeter New England IPAs as well, but this one I think is pretty pretty damn special actually. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, I do like what this beer. I do like how this beer goes about its business. Absolutely. Yeah, aroma wise, this one I think is very, very nice on the malty side of things. You do get a wee bit of that kind of Werther's original brown sugary note out of it, and that's, I think, simply a product of the booziness of this beer. Of course, there's going to be, there probably will be a little bit of like a slightly caramel, some kind of caramel in this Carapils, Caramunich, something like that. There will be something like that in there just to kind of help the booziness of this beer. But yeah, you get a little bit of that Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing out of it. You can smell a little bit of a kind of concentrated caramel in there, and you do get a wee bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity element coming out of this beer as well. So I really like how this beer goes about its business in that sense too. It's really it is very, very interesting. So yeah, the aroma on the malty side of things with this beer is very, very nice and very attractive, I have to say. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me. On the hoppy side of things then, it's also, it just goes together really nicely too. So it's got a lovely big juiciness to it, this beer. I would say yeah, the fruity and hoppy side of this beer comes across as quite juicy, but certainly there's a wee touch of earthiness to this one, a lovely bright floral aromaticity, and also a bit of a kind of grassy, there's also a little bit of a sort of grassy note to it as well. But yeah, the grassy side of things in this is quite smooth. I mean, the floral aromaticity is quite big and quite pungent. You've got a smooth grassiness in there as well, and as I say, just a little bit of earthiness kind of sitting underneath it too. So I really like how that how all of that combines together in this one. The green component in this one almost has a little bit of that kind of wet, leafy grassiness to it, which is quite interesting. So the green component in this, I think the smoothness and the sort of wetness of it mixes in with the with the sort of general vibe, the sort of smoothness of the malt base actually. But on the fruity side of things, it goes together very nicely as well. I mean, you can smell a bit of passion fruit in there. There is a little bit of passion fruit in there. There's a lovely big juicy mango-y element. You've got the undertones of apricot in there, a little bit of a kind of, you've certainly got a big kind of pineapple-y note there too, which I really like. All of that goes together very, very well actually. So yeah, it's a big, the tropical fruits you get out of this one, there's a wee bit of the pungency in there, but it's certainly got a big kind of softness to it as well. I do wonder what hop they've used in this. The smoothness and the softness of it makes me wonder, could it be a little bit of Idaho 7? But you know, it could be a number of things. It could be El Dorado, it could be Galaxy, it could be Victoria's Secret, Simcoe. You know, there's a whole host of different hops that the tropical side of things in this beer could come from, but the softness does make me wonder about a little bit of Idaho 7. But in fairness, with the pungency, that you do get a wee bit more pungency from the passion fruit, and there's a lot of pineapple to this. Galaxy springs to mind as well. So yeah, and you can smell this beer is quite fresh. You still get a wee bit of the dustiness, I think, from the hops as well. But underneath that, I can certainly get a wee tiny touch of a kind of sort of orangey tangerine note. So I do wonder, is there a bit of one of the more orangey leaning hops in this, Azacca perhaps? I don't think, it's not zesty enough, I think, to be Amarillo, and it doesn't have, the beer doesn't have the little earthiness that you often get from Mosaic. So I do wonder, could there be a bit of Azacca in this? Idaho 7 and Azacca, I think, could be an interesting combination for this one, and it would certainly fit the profile. I always love playing guess the hops with these beers. But it's increasingly difficult these days with all the different kind of varieties and things that we've got out there these days. I mean, I'm talking about tropical fruits as well. You've got things like Rakau and Riwaka and all of this in New Zealand that would be other options as well. But anyway, as I say, a little bit of passion fruit, lovely kind of big, soft, juicy mango for this one, a lot of juicy apricot underneath as well, and some lovely kind of pineapple-y elements. And then there's a wee hint of a kind of juicy tangerine note to this one as well, a soft, juicy tangerine. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business. That's for sure. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in the aroma department. But I think it is about time that we taste this one now. So let me just put the rest of it into the glass, because I'm going to be sipping on this one for the rest of the evening. I think this one is the Trismegistus or Trismegistus, I'm not 100% sure. 10.2% New England triple IPA from Omnipollo, one of the first releases from their new brewery in the church in Sundbyberg up in Stockholm. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Alright, first impression. Yeah, got a good little bit of bite to it. It's very fresh because you can get that big sort of, you can certainly get that big kind of hoppy, bitey kind of thing out of it, absolutely. But yeah, overall, it's quite a wet, quite smooth New England IPA, this one, but it's well balanced actually. It does remind me of some of the other ones, some of the more recent New England IPAs that we've had from them in the past actually. So yeah, the way everything kind of fits together in this one goes together really nicely. So, you know, thumbs up to Omnipollo for this. This is pretty damn solid actually. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, the way everything goes together in this one, I think, is just really nice actually. It's one of these beers, it doesn't do anything surprising with the style, you know, but just everything sort of rolls together quite well in this one. And it has, I would say, the other thing that strikes me as being a bit different with this beer compared to the aroma is the kind of wheaty bitiness, if you like, that you get out of this beer. There's certainly a wee bit more of a kind of wheaty bitey character to this one. compared to some of the other beers that we've had in recent times, and I think that's also combined with the sort of dustiness that you get from the hop combinations. Yeah, so yeah, let's break this beer down then and see how we go. So straight away, across the kind of middle third of your palate, you can feel that sort of soft white bready character in there. There's a little bit of a kind of, as you say, you do get a wee bit of that more kind of, it does actually develop, you get a wee bit of a grainy dryness comes out of this beer the further you go into the aftertaste with it, but you get a soft white bready character coming out of this one. The other thing I'll say about this is it's certainly not the thickest of triple IPAs that I've come across. It actually has more of a kind of slick vibe to it, a bit of a lighter kind of slicker vibe to it, so bear that in mind with this. But yeah, as you go across the middle of your palate, you get a nice, as I say, you get a nice kind of soft white bready character to it. That works. If you go to either end of that middle third of your palate, you get more of a kind of bread crusty, grainy note to it. Then on top of that, you can feel there is a wee bit of a smoother kind of, there's a little bit of a smoother white bready sort of thing as well. So you can feel the sort of a crisp grainy bread underneath, a softer white bread sitting on top of it. You can feel the sort of wheaty layer in there smoothing it out, and then you've got the oats kind of sitting on top of that. So it's quite a multifaceted beer, this one. It's quite a few layers in it. But yeah, I do like how this one goes about its business in that regard. I think the more that you drink of this beer and the more your palate adjusts to it, you start to get a wee bit more sweetness out of the malt base. You can feel the oats sort of sweetening up there. So like I say, on top of the kind of wheaty layer, you can feel a nice kind of smooth, not too thick, but still slick, oaty creaminess there. So when you go down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel there's a nice kind of thicker oaty layer there, and as you move out towards the edges of your palate, it's got a little bit more of it's got a wee bit more of a kind of lighter oaty note there. You can feel the oats get a little bit kind of drier and powdery in a sense. So yeah, the sweetness and the smoothness of the oats in the middle of your palate with this beer goes together really, really nicely. But sitting on top of all of that, you've got a nice big kind of big circle of sweet brown sugary element to it. So I really like how this goes together. So in the dead centre of your palate, you can pick up a little bit of a sweet caramel there, but the base of that circle that I'm talking about is the sort of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. So you can feel that in a sort of big circle in the middle of your palate. Sweet caramel in the dead centre, of course. I think again that works very, very well. But yeah, as you move out towards the kind of edges, as you move out towards the edge to the edges of the palate with this beer, it's certainly, you get a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of, and I think the wheaty bite in this beer comes out a wee bit more the further you go into the aftertaste too. But I think on that note, I think we've covered pretty much all of the we've covered pretty much everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate. So let's move on to the back third of the palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there and a wee bit of a bread crusty character, but the base of that back third of your palate is a sort of pardon me, you do get more of a you do get a bit more of a kind of grainy note and a bit of a wheaty bite sitting there as well. So you can feel a bit of a bread crusty layer underneath. You can feel the sort of soft white bread on top of that, the wheat layer, but then the wheat is really quite bitey towards the back of the palate. But on top of all of that, of course, you get the big sort of more airy, yeasty elements coming out of the beer. So I do like how that goes together in this one, that's for sure. So again, you've got a nice, you've got an interesting kind of, you've got a whole host of interesting things going on with this beer. So when you start at the back of your palate, you can feel the sort of the height of the flavour is quite tall, but then it condenses down quite a little bit as you move towards the border with the middle third of your palate. And then the malty side of the beer is quite kind of squashed together in this one in the middle third of your palate. Like I say, this is definitely not the thickest of triple IPAs that you're going to come across. It's actually a more kind of slick take on the style, I would say. But on the hoppy side of things, back corners of the palate, you definitely get a nice wee bit of earthiness in there, so that's making me question what I said earlier about mosaic. But as you move further forward, you can feel it is a little touch herbal, but then as you move towards the front corners of the palate, it does have quite a lot of floral aromatic quality. I think it maybe has a wee touch of a piney resin to it, but to me it strikes me as being a little bit more kind of spicy and floral in a sense. And what I'm thinking in terms of the spiciness, it could be a bit of Columbus that's in here as a bittering hop. And remember, the bittering hops are the early edition ones. New England IPAs tend to rely more on late edition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs have quite a bit more early edition hop to them than New England's do. So yeah, it could either be just the fact that this one is quite fresh and you're still getting some of the green bits from the dry hopping in the beer, or they've used a bit of Columbus in this, because there is a wee bit of spiciness on that, those kind of the front edges of your tongue, but round the front curve of your palate, it's got a nice lighter grassy element to it, and it's got a lovely kind of zestiness as well, which I very much like. So yeah, the zesty grassy kind of thing in this beer is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, green component, this one I think goes together quite nicely, and it gives the beer just a little bit of bite, and it sort of matches up well with the kind of wheaty bitiness that builds in this beer as well. But let's focus on the fruity component of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again a bit of a bready build up and a bit of a bread crust. The base of that front third of your tongue is actually quite smooth. It's more of a kind of white bready, kind of slightly oaty creamy kind of thing, but sitting on top of that you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. But again, at the back of that you get a little bit of a kind of passion fruity pungency. As you move further forward, there's a wee bit of a more mango-y note to it, a bit of apricot in there as well underneath, but I do get quite a bit of pineapple out of this one, and that does make me wonder, the pungency of the passion fruit, the presence of the pineapple in this one, that does make me wonder about Galaxy, because it's a wee bit too pungent to be, there could be a bit of Idaho 7 in there as well, but I very much doubt that it's Idaho 7 on its own. And I do wonder if when you move into the front half of this of the front third of your palate, you can feel there's a bit more of a kind of oily, tangerine-y, mandarin-y note out of this one. So you've got a lovely lighter orangey kind of character, and that makes me think about Azaka, because you've got, and again it's the thing that's making me wonder about Azaka is the pineapple, because Azaka will give you that mandarin-y note, but it'll also give you a wee bit of pineapple. So could this be, I think this might be like Galaxy, potentially Idaho 7 and Azaka. I think it could be a combination like that that's in this one. I'll say that though and I'll be completely wrong, and as I say, it's very difficult to play guess the hops with these beers these days, but yeah, whatever it is that's in this, I think it works very, very well, this one. But certainly if we're talking overall in terms of the fruitiness, I think it leans a bit more towards the tropical side of things, but you get a slightly more oily, citrusy component to this beer the further you go into the aftertaste too. So yeah, for me it works really well. So thumbs up to Omnipollo for the flavour profile of this beer. Certainly a more kind of slick and slightly lighter take on the New England triple IPA in my opinion. So yeah, I like that for sure. But yeah, very nice stuff. Let's round off this review with the mouthfeel, and I would recommend that you try this beer. Just as good as some of the other Omnipollo things we've had in recent times. It feels a little bit old school, and as I say, this beer has a real familiarity about it from my point of reference. But yeah, let's look at the as I say, let's look at the mouthfeel of this beer then. So overall, I would say this beer is kind of bottom end of full body, top end of mid body, not the thickest of New England IPAs that we've come across, especially triple IPAs. It does take the approach of being kind of more creamy and slightly slick in a sense, which I can appreciate. The carbonation is very, very smooth in this one. And I think, yeah, overall, as I say, creamy and slick. I think that's a good thing to say about it. In terms of the hoppy bitterness, I think this one feels a little bit more bitter. Something tells me though, as I say, that I'm drinking this one quite fresh, and you've still got a bit of the kind of green from the dry hopping lingering there in this one. But as it stands, I would have guessed that this one was like 50-ish IBUs, 50 or 60 IBUs. It does have a wee bit more of that, and the bitterness I think does build the further you go into the aftertaste. Now, for a standard New England IPA, the bitterness tends to be about 30 IBUs, but I have seen that some breweries, they take it up 10 IBUs for the double, then they'll take it up another 10 IBUs for the triple. So if this one was 50 IBUs, for me that would be kind of about right. I do think that to balance out the big kind of thickness and quite often sweetness that you get from the bigger malt bases in these double and triple IPAs, you do need a bit more hoppy bitterness. So I wouldn't be surprised if this one is like 50 or 60 IBUs. And as I say, I'm drinking this one fresh, so it feels about that. It does feel kind of roughly about that bitterness. But the malty side of this beer, as we say, it's got a nice kind of smoothness to it. It's got a wee bit of wheaty bite, kind of some oaty kind of creaminess to it, and a little bit of a kind of brown sugary sweetness, which I do like. The fruity side of the beer, I think it leans more towards the tropical side of things, but you do have a wee bit of an oily citrus in there to kind of counter that as well. And yeah, as I say, just overall a really nice, slick and quite smooth New England triple IPA, this one. So this has been a really interesting beer to review. For me, it's got a bit of a nostalgia element to it, and it does come across as a little bit of a kind of old school New England IPA, if that at all makes sense. So yes, I think we can round off the review there. This has been a really interesting review for me, and I look forward to trying the double IPA that I've got as well. Actually, I do wonder how regularly we're going to see releases from Omnipollo now that they have this brewery in Sundbyberg up and running. Maybe we'll see things quite regularly. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So this one was the Trismegistus, or Trismegistus, not 100% sure how to pronounce that, a triple IPA coming in at 10.2% ABV, New England of course, from Omnipollo in Sundbyberg in Stockholm here in Sweden. Very, very nice stuff. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Omnipollo. As I say, we will definitely return to these guys at some point in the near future, but this one was pretty interesting, and I'm curious to see what the double IPA has in store for us. So you'll see that video appear within the next kind of week or two. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, Slanja, Skull, cheers. Pardon me. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Omnipollo, but I will catch you guys very soon in another review. Check out my social media, check out theirs. This one was the Trismegistus, whatever. 10.2% triple IPA from Omnipollo in Sundbyberg, Stockholm, Sweden. Slanja, Skål, and cheers.